All right. I just want to do a quick run through here and show you what exactly we mean by gaps. You hear a lot about this and how being gap sound or having gap integrity is really important to playing defense. So, gaps are all the spaces between offensive players near the line of scrimmage or on the line of scrimmage. So, essentially, any player that's within 1 yard. So, if you look at the diagram in front of you, you have an offensive formation, offense attacking that way, just in case you need to see that. They can take the ball and try to send it through any one of these gaps. They're going to use any means necessary and attack the whole field if they have to. So they're going to try and exploit any gap they can find an opening in. So the gaps are essentially these spaces right here. All right. Now you'll see and we'll count them all and we'll show you how they're all named and so on. All right. But if we see here, right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 gaps that are presented here. Now, there is a naming system for these. It's not universal. Again, there's no universal terminology in football, but the most common way to denote which gaps these are is like this. You use an ABC system, where A is your innermost two gaps. All right. So this is the gap between the center and the guard. B gaps are your gaps between the guards and the tackles. C gaps are between tackles and tight ends, or if you look over here, in this case, this open space or alley between the tackle and the slot receiver. Now, what you have out here, these are also called D gaps. A lot of people also call these the edge or the alley. Edge and alley essentially mean the edge or space around the box that's not necessarily between the tackles. Sometimes the C gap and the D gap overlap in terms of what constitutes as the edge or the alley as well. But a lot of times when you don't see too many people saying D gap, they'll often say edge or alley or something like that. Now, this space out here between the widest receivers on the field and the sideline, so this space over here, these are the sidelines. I like to call these the rail. All right. So you could call them like the sideline gap, whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you. But I like to call them the rail gap. I call them the rail because if you look on the edge of a field, you often have these little hash marks going down like this. And you'll even hear sometimes of terms or even routes and pass plays known as rail routes, or routes where receivers go right down these hashes that are right along the sideline. So anyways, I call those the rails. You need to know these because, again, the offense can try to attack any one of these gaps. From a defensive standpoint, it's imperative that you assign defenders different gaps so that when the offense tries to move the ball, whether it be a fast screen, a run, a swing pass, something like that, you want to make sure that there are no options for the ball to go through. So if anyone's familiar with rugby, it's very similar to setting up a defensive line in rugby and taking away channels between opponents with the ball, right? So those are just what the gaps are. Understand that when you are watching a team play defense, somebody is responsible for every gap on the field 99% of the time. When you watch the NFL, you'll see teams, even in college, you'll see some calls or blitzes where they intentionally vacate a gap in order to exploit another one or overload another area. But at the youth level, high school level, the vast majority of snaps you do see in the NFL and college, someone is assigned to every single one of these gaps. How the offense lines up in their formation may create or get more gaps on one side or the other, and that's also what often causes defenses to check or audible or make shifts in their defensive call so that they can fit to the gaps properly. I mentioned fit because you'll hear me say that a lot with a lot of videos I do talking about defense. Anyways, those are your gaps. Again, you have your A gaps, B gaps, and C gaps. Those are your gaps between your offensive linemen. The C gaps is between the offensive tackles and tight ends. D gaps are between the next defender out or offensive player out, and so on. This rail out here, again, I like to call the space between the widest receiver and the sideline the rail. You could call it an E gap if you want. You could even see instances where there's an F gap. When you get into quad formations and stuff like that. Anyways, hope you enjoyed. Hope this helps make gaps make more sense. Please reach out if you have any questions.